The applause was deafening, the show perfectly on schedule, until a terrified stagehand thrust a crumpled note into my hand live on air, demanding I delay taping because someone's entire life depended on the next 5 minutes. The applause was a physical thing, a tidal wave of sound and heat that washed over me from the studio audience. It was the best part of the job. The lights were hot, the energy was electric, and for this 1 hour, I was the king of my own little television kingdom. The Steve Sterling Show was my baby, a well-oiled machine I had spent 15 years perfecting. Every camera angle, every cue card, every pre-interview with a guest was timed to the second. I lived and breathed by the schedule. Punctuality wasn't just a virtue in my world, it was a religion. "All right, settle down, you beautiful people," I grinned, holding my hands up to quiet the crowd. My producer, Diane, was counting down in my earpiece. "And we're live to tape in 10, 9... I took a deep breath, my game face on. The guest for the first segment was a local firefighter who had become an internet sensation for rescuing a cat from a ridiculously tall tree using a drone and a net. It was the kind of light, feel-good story my audience adored, easy, breezy, and completely on schedule. 8, 7... That's when I saw the disruption. Out of the corner of my eye, a flash of panicked movement by camera 2. It was Kevin, one of our junior stagehands. He was maybe 20, all gangly limbs and perpetual anxiety. He was supposed to be backstage, checking the props for the next segment. Instead, he was hovering just at the edge of the stage, out of the main camera shot, but clearly visible to me and half the front row. He was clutching a folded piece of paper and looked like he was about to either throw up or faint. 6, 5, Diane's voice was a calm, steady metronome in my ear. "Steve, what's Kevin doing?" "Get him out of there." I gave a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of my head, a signal for him to get back. My smile for the audience never wavered, but internally, a cold spike of adrenaline shot through me. Unscheduled things did not happen on my show. Ever. Kevin didn't move. He took a hesitant step forward, his eyes wide with terror, and held out the note. 4! Diane's voice was getting tight. "Steve, ignore him." We roll no matter what. Stick to the monologue. The audience was starting to notice. A few murmurs rippled through the front rows. My smile felt like it was carved from stone. I had a choice to make in the next 3 seconds. I could follow 15 years of training and Diane's screaming order in my ear, starting my monologue and letting security deal with the terrified kid. Or I could break the cardinal rule of live television and acknowledge the chaos. 3, 2... Kevin took another desperate step, practically lunging onto the stage. He thrust the note into my hand, his own hand shaking so violently the paper rattled. He whispered, "Please," his voice cracking, then scurried back into the shadows like a frightened mouse. It was all so fast, so surreal. I was holding a foreign object, a folded, crumpled piece of cue card. My brain was short-circuiting. The teleprompter was rolling with my opening joke, the audience was waiting, and Diane was now just making a sound in my ear that was somewhere between a gasp and a scream. 1! There was no time. I couldn't just toss it. The front row had seen the whole exchange. I had to address it. I kept the plastic smile plastered on my face and held up the note as if it were part of a bit. "Well, look at this," I chuckled, my voice an octave higher than usual. "Getting fan mail delivered mid-show now. Must be my new cologne." A wave of polite laughter rippled through the crowd. They thought it was a planned gag. In my ear, Diane was silent, the silence of pure, unadulterated rage. I knew I'd have hell to pay later, but in that moment I had to know what was on that note. What could possibly be so important that a terrified stagehand would risk his job to stop my show? With a theatrical flair, I unfolded the paper. My eyes scanned the message, and the fake smile instantly melted from my face. The laughter from the audience died down as they saw my expression change. The air in the studio suddenly felt thick and heavy. The handwriting was a frantic, almost illegible scrawl, clearly written under immense pressure. There were only 2 sentences. The first one hit me like a punch to the gut. It read, "Please delay taping." My blood ran cold. This wasn't a joke. It was a demand, an impossible one. I could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on me, the heat of the lights, the suffocating silence. Diane's voice finally crackled back to life in my ear, a furious, sharp whisper. "Steve, what the hell does it say?" Read the prompter. Now. But I couldn't, because my eyes had drifted to the second sentence, the one written underneath, the one that made absolutely no sense and yet changed everything. It read, "My whole life depends on the next 5 minutes. Look at seat J14. Her name is Chloe." My training, my instincts, every fiber of my being screamed at me to read the teleprompter, say the joke, start the show, pretend the note never happened. But I couldn't. I was frozen, the crumpled paper feeling like a 10-pound weight in my hand. J14, Chloe. The words echoed in my head, a bizarre mantra of doom. Diane's voice was a hornet in my ear. "Steve, I swear to God, if you don't start your monologue, I'm cutting to commercial and sending security out there. You have 3 seconds. I had to move. I had to do something." Acting on an impulse I still can't explain, I turned my back to the main camera, forcing them to take a wide shot. I pretended to be interacting with the band leader, a classic stalling tactic. "Randy," I said, my voice tight, "you feeling good tonight?" Randy, a seasoned pro, just smiled and gave me a thumbs up, completely oblivious to the hurricane in my head. But the move bought me a precious second. It allowed me to sweep my eyes over the audience, past the bright lights, into the tiered rows of seating. A, B, C. My gaze jumped from section to section. I knew the layout by heart. J was 10 rows back, center right. I counted the seats. 12, 13, 14. And there she was. She wasn't what I expected. I don't know what I expected exactly. A woman in distress? Someone looking panicked or afraid? But Chloe was just a woman. Pretty, with dark curly hair tied up in a loose bun, wearing a simple blue dress. She was looking right at me, a slightly confused but pleasant smile on her face, like every other audience member. She had no idea she was the focal point of a crisis that was currently derailing a multi-million-dollar television production. She was just a girl watching a show. And that made the whole situation 100 times more confusing and 1,000 times more terrifying. What did she have to do with Kevin, the terrified stagehand? "That's it. I'm calling it." Diane's voice was ice. "Cutting to commercial break in 5, 4. This was it, the point of no return. My career, my reputation for flawless professionalism, it was all on the line. I could let Diane take control, cut to a commercial, and this whole bizarre incident would be swept under the rug. I'd be reamed out, maybe even suspended, but the show would go on. Or I could see this through. I looked from the note in my hand to the unsuspecting woman in seat J14, and then I thought of the sheer primal terror in Kevin's eyes. His whole life depends on the next 5 minutes. It was insane. It was unprofessional. It was career suicide. I chose career suicide. As Diane said 3, I spun back around to face the main camera, holding my hands up with the biggest, most charming smile I could muster. "Hold on, Diane," I said, speaking directly into my microphone, a message to the control room. "Don't go to break. Folks, I apologize. We seem to be having a moment." The audience let out a collective, intrigued gasp. In my ear, there was dead silence. I had just gone nuclear. I had overridden my producer on live television. I could practically feel the shockwave ripple through the control booth. "You know," I continued, my heart hammering against my ribs, "we plan every second of this show. We have scripts, we have rehearsals, we have a teleprompter telling me exactly what to say." I pointed to the glowing screen. "But tonight feels a little different. Tonight, I think we're going to throw the script out the window." The crowd erupted in cheers. They loved it. The chaos, the unpredictability. It was real. They were part of something no one had expected. I, on the other hand, felt like I was walking a tightrope over a canyon with no net. I took a deep breath. "Okay, Sterling, you broke the show. Now you have to fix it." I folded the note deliberately and put it in my pocket. "A little while ago," I said, my voice dropping to a more serious, intimate tone, "a very brave, or possibly very foolish, young man handed me a note." I looked towards the wings, in the direction Kevin had disappeared. "His name is Kevin. He's one of our stagehands. Works his tail off back there every single day. Kevin, I don't know what this is about, but you stopped my show cold. You've got the attention of everyone in this room and about 1 million people watching at home." I paused, letting the weight of the moment sink in. "So whatever you have to do, I think you'd better come out here and do it now." A hush fell over the entire studio. Every single person, every camera, every light seemed to be aimed at the darkness backstage. For a second, nothing happened. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. Had I just committed professional seppuku for a prank? Did Kevin run out of the building in a panic? Diane's voice finally came back into my ear, no longer angry, just a dead, flat whisper. "Steve, what have you done?" And then a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Kevin. He was still pale, still trembling, but the terror in his eyes had been replaced by something else, a fragile, shaky resolve. He walked slowly, hesitantly, towards the center of the stage. And that's when I saw it. Clutched in his white-knuckled hand, so tightly I thought he might crush it, was a small, square, velvet box. The velvet box was a tiny, dark void in the center of a supernova of stage lights. It seemed to suck all the sound out of the room. The audience held a collective breath. In my earpiece, the dead silence from the control booth was more deafening than Diane's yelling had been. I had a feeling they were all just staring at the monitors, their jaws on the floor, completely unsure of what protocol to follow when the host turns his own show into a public spectacle. I walked over to Kevin, moving slowly so as not to spook him. I unclipped the spare lavalier microphone from my jacket and gently clipped it onto his shirt. His hands were shaking so hard I had to steady them. "Okay, son," I murmured, my voice low and calm, just for him. "You've got the stage. Don't waste it." He gave a tiny, terrified nod. I turned back to the audience, now playing the role of master of ceremonies for a train wreck of my own making. "Folks," I said, my voice resonating with a practiced warmth I didn't feel, "it seems Kevin has something he'd like to say." I gestured for him to face the audience. to face her. His eyes scanned the crowd, desperately seeking out seat J14. The camera operators, finally catching on, followed his gaze. A bright spotlight flared to life, cutting through the ambient blue lighting of the audience seats and landing squarely on the woman in the blue dress. Chloe. Her hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. A slow blush crept up her neck. She looked from Kevin, a deer in the headlights on my stage, to me, the ringmaster of this madness, and back again. She was utterly and completely stunned. "Chloe," Kevin began, his voice barely a whisper. I subtly motioned to him, tapping my own microphone. He cleared his throat and spoke again, his amplified voice trembling through the studio speakers. "Chloe, hi." A nervous laugh rippled through the audience. I know this is insane," he stammered, his eyes locked on hers. "And I'm probably fired, and you probably think I'm a complete lunatic, and you're probably right." He took a shaky breath. "We met 3 months ago. You were in the audience for the show with the celebrity chef, seat G7. You laughed at one of Steve's bad jokes, and I was standing backstage, and I heard it. It was the best sound I'd ever heard." Chloe's eyes were glistening now. The confused smile was gone, replaced by an expression of raw, overwhelming emotion. "I know I'm just a stagehand," Kevin continued, gaining a bit of momentum. "I know I don't have much, but I've spent every day for the last 3 months trying to be a man who deserves to be with you. The note. The reason I had to do this now. I overheard you on the phone in the lobby before the show. About that job offer in Seattle. About your parents wanting you to take it. About you leaving tonight." His voice broke on the last word. The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place in my mind. My whole life depends on the next 5 minutes. It wasn't an exaggeration. It was his literal, last-ditch Hail Mary pass. "I can't lose you, Chloe," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't let you get on a plane without knowing how I feel. Without knowing that my life basically started the day I met you." And then, with a grace that defied his earlier awkwardness, he dropped to one knee. The entire audience gasped as one. He opened the velvet box. Even from where I was standing, I could see a simple, elegant diamond catch the light and fracture it into 100 tiny rainbows. The studio was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Every single person was leaning forward, hanging on his next words. Kevin looked up at the woman in the spotlight, a beacon in the darkness, and poured every last ounce of his heart into 4 perfect words. "Chloe Astor, will you marry me?" Time seemed to stop. Chloe was crying freely now, tears streaming down her face, her hand still clamped over her mouth as she nodded, a silent, frantic yes that only Kevin could see. She started to stand up, to answer him, to run down the aisle. The audience was already starting to erupt into a roar of applause. It was the perfect moment, the perfect, beautiful, chaotic ending. But before she could utter a single word, before the applause could truly begin, a man's voice, raw and furious, boomed from the back of the audience. "Don't you dare answer him, Chloe!" The cheers died in an instant. Every head, including mine, whipped around towards the source of the voice. 2 rows behind Chloe, a distinguished-looking man in his late 50s, his face purple with rage, was on his feet. He was pointing a trembling finger at the stage, at Kevin. "I will not let you throw your life away on this nobody!" he yelled. Chloe froze, her face a mask of horror. I stared at the man, then back at the heartbroken boy on his knee on my stage. and a cold, sickening realization washed over me. This wasn't a fairy tale ending. I hadn't just hijacked my show for a romantic proposal. I had stumbled into the middle of a family war, and I had just broadcast the first shots live on national television. The man's voice hung in the air like poison. The beautiful, chaotic energy of the proposal shattered into a million sharp, ugly pieces. The audience was stunned into a thick, uncomfortable silence. Chloe looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Her father, it had to be her father, was now striding down the aisle, his expensive suit doing nothing to hide the pure, animalistic fury in his eyes. "Get up!" he snarled, not at Chloe, but at Kevin, who was still on one knee, the ring box held out like a fragile shield. "Get up and get off this stage before I have you arrested for trespassing." In my ear, Diane's voice finally came back, sharp and decisive. "Security is on the way. Steve, get control of your show. Cut to commercial. Now." But I couldn't. I had started this fire, and I'd be damned if I was going to walk away and let Kevin get burned. I stepped forward, placing myself physically between the enraged father and the heartbroken stagehand. "Sir," I said, my voice calm but firm, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in the aisle. "Sir, this is my stage, and this young man is my guest." The father stopped dead, his glare shifting to me. "Your guest? He's a glorified janitor. And you," he spat, his finger now aimed at me, "are a clown. Turning my daughter's life into a cheap spectacle for your ratings." "My ratings are just fine," I shot back, a dangerous edge creeping into my voice. "What I'm more concerned about is a father who thinks he has the right to publicly humiliate his daughter and dictate who she's allowed to love." A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience. They had come for a feel-good story, and now they had a villain. The father's face contorted, but before he could retort, another voice cut through the tension. "Dad, stop!" It was Chloe. She had found her voice, and it was shaking, but clear. She walked down the aisle, past her fuming father, without so much as a glance at him. Her eyes were only for Kevin. She walked right up onto the stage, the spotlight following her every step. She ignored me, ignored her father, ignored the cameras and the silent watching crowd. She knelt down on the stage, right in front of Kevin, so they were eye to eye. "Chloe, your father," Kevin began, his voice hoarse. "He's not the one you asked," she whispered, her voice picked up by his microphone. She gently took his face in her hands, wiping away a tear he didn't seem to know he'd shed. "Kevin, for 3 months, you've made me feel more seen, more cherished than anyone has in my entire life. You didn't see me as an investment or a future partner at a law firm. You just saw me. You heard my laugh." Her own voice broke with a sob. She looked down at the ring in the box, then back up into his eyes. "Yes," she said, her voice ringing with a newfound strength that filled the entire studio. "Yes, I will marry you." Kevin let out a choked gasp, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the studio erupted. It wasn't just applause. It was a roar, a standing ovation. People were whistling, cheering, some were even crying. It was the single most powerful, most real moment I had ever witnessed on that stage. Chloe's father stood frozen in the aisle, defeated. The wave of public opinion had crashed over him, leaving him isolated on an island of his own anger. He turned without another word and stormed out of the studio, the heavy exit doors swinging shut behind him. I let the applause wash over the newly engaged couple for a long moment, letting them have their perfect, hard-won victory. Finally, I held up my hands. "I think," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "that our firefighter and his cat story can wait until tomorrow." The audience laughed, a warm, cathartic sound. "Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the future Mr. and Mrs. Kevin." As the show finally cut to a long-overdue commercial break, the lights came up. The spell was broken. Diane was on the stage in seconds, but the fury I expected wasn't there. She just looked at me, shaking her head, a wry smile playing on her lips. "You are an absolute menace, Steve Sterling. The network is going to have my head." "It was worth it," I said, watching Kevin and Chloe, now wrapped in each other's arms, completely oblivious to the world. "Yeah," Diane admitted, her gaze softening. "It was." She then turned her professional glare on Kevin. "You're not fired, kid. In fact, you're promoted. Head of the props department. You've got a wedding to pay for." Kevin's jaw dropped, and he just stared at her, speechless. The fallout was immense. The clip went viral before our show had even finished taping. The proposal became the highest-rated segment in the show's history. My gamble had paid off in ways I could never have imagined, but none of that mattered. What mattered was that for one night, we threw the script away. We chose chaos over control and humanity over production schedules. I had risked my career on a crumpled note from a terrified kid, and in doing so, I had hosted the most honest, the most dramatic, and the most beautifully real television I had ever been a part of. And I knew, without a single doubt, I'd do it again in a heartbeat.